Well, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, some of you, for coming back. We had a wonderful workshop with my good friend here, Dr. Chris Azzara, this morning from 10 to 12, and he talked about the joy of creativity in improvisation. I got a couple of housekeeping things I have to do before Chris will take the floor, and he'll be here till the sun goes down. I know you're going to enjoy what he has to say. But I first of all want to thank the Wentz Family Foundation for sponsoring this event. Really grateful for that. Thank all of you for coming. They say, you know, these are free to get in, but if you want to get out, there's a donation box on the way out. So those are always greatly appreciated. No, in all seriousness, we're so grateful. This is a brand new facility. It's our first year, and we're grateful you're all here. You've seen his bio. He's an educator from the Eastman School of Music. His joy is music. His love is communication. Welcome, Dr. Chris Azzara.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, first of all, it's been a delight to be here. Everybody's so kind and generous, and it's been wonderful to be a part of this whole scene. And we'll spend about an hour together thinking about how creativity can be more central to our learning as musicians. And in general, if you're not somebody who's say, doing music for your profession, it's very generalizable to life, making more creativity and improvisation and being present in your life in general. If I could survey, how many of you all play an instrument or sing in a choir or do something like this, right? And then how many of you are just really curious about music and love listening to music? And, right, like, which we all should have our hands up about that. But I'm pretty much, a way to summarize my passion and the work that I've done over the decades is sort of to think about how creativity and improvisation do play a central role in our learning as well as our expression of ourselves as musicians. And many times in a lot of contexts for lessons on instruments, that's not something that has happened typically. You don't typically go to a lesson and expect, okay, we have a way to get you to improvise music. That's typically what happens is people are oriented around playing and using notation, reading music. Anybody have an experience like playing piano lessons or, yeah, that kind of thing? And maybe it was it your first priority to learn maybe 100 songs by ear and play them without looking at notation? Was that something you did? Probably not. And if you did, that's special, I'm glad. And it's not that reading is something we shouldn't do. I think reading is an important part of curriculum. But we need to speak the language that we're reading. So the more that we can be spontaneous and interactive and communicative, spontaneously with each other, and then also through reflection, where we reflect on what we're learning, and we're able to present ideas through our creating as improvisers, but also through our creativity as people who can compose music. So I make a lot of analogies to language that help, because we all have learned to improvise language. And you're improvising with me now, if you're paying attention. Unless you're thinking about, like, well, when is this over? The idea that we can spontaneously speak to each other, and then we can actually bring it to an artistic level by having an embrace for poetry, for articulate language, for what do poets do when they present language? And how can we speak more poetically, because we do want to be convincing when we share our ideas with others. What do people who are convincing, how do they speak? And I think it's important to think about the word convincing, because when somebody makes a musical statement, one of the things that is a part of that expression is to make a convincing musical statement. What does that even mean? So we're going to delve into that, thinking about improvisation as the spontaneous expression of ideas, and maybe composition as the reflection of what we've done, and it also allows time for revision and then expression. So when you write music, you can actually time travel. You can write something and then go back in time and adjust the introduction And then you can go forward in time, you can time travel. In improvisation, you're in the moment, so if you want to change anything, you have to wait till the next gig for that. That was supposed to be a joke. So the element of conversation is important because that's the whole idea of improvisers, is that there's an interaction. And interaction is key to learning in general. We also have this element of being in the moment, so being present and in the moment is important. And I'll give you musical examples of this after we get through some of the definitions of what I'm doing. I've already mentioned what reflection, but you have this idea of imagination and then the grit to see that imagination through. And people think, well, what does that actually mean? And there's if you want to watch a nice TED Talk on creativity and school, there's a person named Ken Robinson. Have you ever heard of Ken Robinson? I recommend Ken Robinson. He tells a story about a little one, a little person, maybe kindergarten age, and they're drawing a picture, using their imagination, drawing a picture, and a grown-up says, "What are you drawing?" And the little kindergartner says, "Well, I'm drawing a picture of God." And the grown-up says, "Oh, well, nobody knows what God looks like." And the little person says, "Well, they will in a minute." That's what grit is, right? And the idea of having an imagination and the courage to see that through and present yourself in a way that is very expressive and in the moment and all of that. So this is an important aspect of learning and life in general. And in music, that means we have to learn by ear. And a lot of people, they have different experiences with learning by ear. I think it's different now than it was when I started doing this many years ago. I would ask this question. For example, was anybody ever discouraged from playing by ear in a music lesson where the teacher said, "Stop playing by ear"? I don't get as many hands as I used to. Anybody relate to that? Don't play by ear. But I would respond to that by saying, well, what else do you do? That's like asking somebody not to kick with your foot. Like, what else do you do? When you read, you should be using your ear. And what it is, it's a relationship between, when people in jazz, they say you have good ears. You might have nice ears, but the ears is a metaphor for you're a good musician. You have clarity of your understanding of music, and it happens through creating the pathways by ear. So this is important, and more specifically, learning from the repertoire you love. Songs, pieces, etc. And paying attention to the repertoire as they can help you tell a story. And that's really what learning is. You know, the word education, anybody a Latin scholar in here? You know, educate comes from a Latin root of, anybody? What's that? Educare. We have a Latin scholar, thank you. And what does educare mean? Do you know that one? I can tell you. What? Yes, to lead it out. So it doesn't mean to stuff a passive person full of. It means to lead out. I like to think of the idea that we all have gifts inside that haven't been opened yet. And a teacher or a friend who's maybe serving as somebody who can help is somebody who leads those gifts out. And they wake up the sleeping gifts and bring them out. It's that kind of relationship when we have colleagues and teachers that can help us understand how to tell our story. And what is that story? So the idea of reading then gets put into perspective. Before I get into the reading thing, you think about all the repertoire out there that can serve us an example. I was doing some of it this morning. I was thinking on the way over today, there's a symphony by Beethoven. It's a slow movement of the 7th Symphony, and it starts with this. You guys know this piece? That's how it starts. And then it does this nice. I like that. And then little power chord here. And in case you didn't get it the first time, you get this idea, right? But what you're hearing is this rhythm ba, 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 ba. Can you chant that? For 9 minutes. Because what he does is he layers. He layers and layers all the parts of the piece on this sort of foundation of a rhythm pattern. And so a person that is trying to create music might say, oh, well, what if I did one of those? What if I came up with a rhythm and repeated it and used that as a foundation? That's how we think when we're improvising and composing and creating music. And this idea that what Beethoven does is he makes melodies, decorates, all with this foundation of the ba, 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 underpinning it, right? You have a simple piece that young people learn that Mozart actually liked. We all know that. There's Twinkle here, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But that's a French folk song. Anybody French in here? Do we have French? Where's Genevieve? No. But that's a French folk song, and it has one rhythm pattern. Ba, 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 ba. Yeah, so do 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 do. That was an interesting moment. I was microphones. Do. Hey, I can hear it now. It's really interesting. Let me do that again. Do 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 do. Now I know what they feel like in stadiums when they sing. You know, you have to be careful with that. But do you hear how the rhythm pattern is repeated the whole time? Now, not to get too technical, but that song is actually a chord progression that has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's in lots of songs. The Italians actually named it. The Italians named all the chord progressions. They named that one the Passamento Moderno. You want to speak some Italian? Wait, I've been to France, Italy, I've got Latin going on. But this idea of going from here, doing that, is a thing. So now we've got this rhythm cohesiveness and a model for harmony, and you can create things to tell your own story. For example, Amazing Grace has the same chords. It goes to just like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And just like Twinkle, Little Star, it goes here. So somebody who has an awareness of that, it's a basic harmony that goes do, 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 do. That's all it is. And then it gets decorated. But if we can sing something like that, do, 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 that's the foundation for a lot of music. In Nashville, they would call it 14-15 because it goes 1, 4, 1, 5. Those are the chord numbers. Okay. In Italy, they would call it the Passamento Moderno. It's just one of those things that has been around forever and will never go away. And you can decorate. The reason I say decorate is because you can melodically decorate and embellish, but you can also harmonically decorate and embellish. Now, when I go to the idea of reading should reflect that kind of understanding about creativity. So when you read, all reading can do is remind you of how musical you are. If you think about what reading music is, right? Because music doesn't sing in tune. I don't call it music, I call it notation. I know I have some quirky habits, but one of them is I refer to the thing on the dots on the paper. I don't call it music. Humans are music, and the notation represents the music. It isn't music. So it reminds us of how musical we are. It should be a reminder. I got that from Socrates. Anybody ever read Phaedrus? In Phaedrus, Socrates talks about how be careful of letters, because you'll have the appearance of wisdom, and you may not know anything. But you sound good. But it's not until you have a dialogue about it, and you speak about it, and you interact and have life in it, that's when you start to learn what it is. And so Jane Healy is a psychologist in language arts. She's not a musician per se. I don't know, maybe she is. I don't know that part of her. But she wrote a book called Endangered Minds, Why Children Don't Think and What We Can Do About It. And I would say to you that she says that the ability to bark at print is not reading. Reading, well, she says many well-meaning parents think it is, many well-meaning caregivers think it is. She says the real heart of the matter is how well do children understand what they have read? Can they reason? So reason is that you have some kind of dialogue in your mind about what you're understanding. There's a conversation you have where you're thinking about what it is, what it isn't. Do I agree? Do I disagree? Where do I understand this? And how is this working, right? That's reason. When you have talking, that's improvising in music. In music, reason would be being able to hear the sound in your head without it being physically present and understand it. And how clear is it? Like we all know the song Happy Birthday. So if we'd sing Happy Birthday, whose birthday is it? Nobody's birthday. Well, let's sing to Paul, maybe. I don't know. But it goes like this. The song goes, Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Paul. Happy birthday to you. Now, can you hear that in your head? Without the sound there, well, I'll start and then I'll stop. I'll go like this, happy birthday. But in your head now, no sound, but what's going on in there? Ready? Happy. Yeah. Nice! Were you hearing that? Now, if somebody came in the room and I asked that question, and they would say, what are you hearing? I'm not hearing anything. Because they didn't hear the first part of the question, right? That is vital. That's why music is core subject to me. Music is a core subject because of that. Now, how clear is your understanding for that? And please remember that there are some people who have the music for things that there are no words for. There's no science for it, there's no math for it, there's music for it. And there's English for things there isn't this for, and there's science for things there isn't that for. But if you think more globally, it's all part of being somebody who's learned, because they all kind of connect to each other. I think some of you are aware of that. You know, the science and music and math and poetry of English and all this kind of stuff. There's all kinds of connections you can make. The poetry of language is they use musical terms. What's the meter of the poetry? Iambic pentameter, iambic tetrameter. Anybody ever learn that stuff? Like tetrameter, iambic tetrameter. So, alas, my love, you do me wrong to cast me off discourteously. You know that poem? And I have wandered for so long, delighting in your company. That's Green Sleeves was all my joy. That's the song Green Sleeves. And somebody back then in the day wrote a melody to that poetic rhythm, poetic meter. Do you know what common meter is? Common meter, you would find it in a hymnal. Amazing Grace is in common meter. Common meter is when you go ba 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 ba. So this way you could say, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. What am I singing? The little town of Bethlehem. It's because it's also in common meter. Or another example of common meter. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. That's a duple version of it. What song is that? America the Beautiful, right. So this is the poetry and music coming together and have an awareness of that kind of learning and understanding for what music is what we're talking about when we improvise it, and we can compose it. And when you think about it, when you listen, am I hearing what you think? No, you're hearing somebody else's thinking, right? And then when you improvise music or when you speak a language, am I hearing what you think? I want to be. You have to have empathy and listen, right? But you are expressing something. Now, when you read, are you sharing what you think? Not so much, right? You're trying to listen. Reading is listening, right? And then when you compose, is that what you think? Yeah, that's what you think. Now, unfortunately, in music classes all over the country and in the world, there's not enough of, well, what do the students think? This is what somebody else wrote, and we can perform that, but what do the students think? That's why I'm so passionate about this. Because it's dangerous not to find out what the students think. And so, what does this mean realistically? I want to have some fun with this, but I don't want anybody to feel funny or anything, but I was asking Paul, I need somebody who can, who considers himself somebody who can read English well, but you can't know anything about astronomy. So those are the criteria for a volunteer. Know nothing about astronomy, but if you could volunteer to read something and you would be good at reading, you can pronounce words well, etc., right? What's your name?
Rick.
Rick. So we have Rick. How about Rick? Okay, Rick, come on up to this mic, and he's going to read the units of stellar distances.
Units of stellar distances. The angular semi-major axis of the parallactic ellipse is the stellar parallax of the star. Since the major axis of the ellipse is the maximum apparent angular deflection of the star as viewed from opposite ends of the diameter of the Earth's orbit, the stellar parallax, the semi-major axis of this ellipse, is the gain at the star's distance, subtended by 1 AU perpendicular to the line of sight.
Wow, man. Now, just bear with me, Rick. So he even admitted, like, I don't know what I'm saying. He sounds pretty good. He sounds really smart. And that's really good. The only time I would rehearse this now, this is what happens a lot in music class, you rehearse the mistake you made, and you say, it's actually, be careful of that word. I think it was ellipse that you were stumbling on? Ellipse.
I almost said eclipse the first time.
Yeah, so that's because we just almost had one. At least in Rochester, there were clouds. Yeah. It was a bummer. But it got dark, so that was kind of cool. I'm an optimist. But anyway, the point is I could have him even get louder and softer and pronounce things clearly and really get articulate and perform it and deliver it, and he still wouldn't know what he was talking about. So how do I find out? So what if I start talking to Rick about it? Now, I'm not somebody who knows a lot about this subject, but I do know what an AU is. Does anybody know? An AU is an astronomical unit. And an astronomical unit is the distance from the Earth to the sun. And so this is a paragraph about how you measure the distances between stars. And you use the astronomical unit. See, I'm using my own language, right? Is everybody understanding? So, and then I might ask you, have you ever thought about how far away the sun is from the Earth? Well, it's called an astronomical unit. And I probably have to look it up. There's a certain number of miles, I'm sure. How many? Does anybody know that? Yeah, how many? So here, see, now, did you hear that? 93 million. I have a friend. What's your name? Fran. So Fran knows. If I want to get next to this paragraph, I got to get next to Fran. You hear what I'm talking about? And that's the difference between barking at print and then having some nice dialogue and learning.
I was barking. Okay.
But now, I think you probably would do more than bark. I mean, you know what an astronomical unit is, etc.
So I'd understand the last sentence.
There you go. Thank you very much. You're a gentleman and a scholar. So, what we need in music, and that's what we're going to investigate, for the remainder. But I do want to make one more analogy to language. So, letters need the context of words, and words need the context of sentences, and sentences need the context of stories, as you learn to read and as you learn to speak. And there are only a limited number of phonemes in English. A phoneme is the smallest increment of sound we make. So a note, one note, it's a little bit of a stretch for the analogy, because a note can actually have a lot of power in its context if you're a musician, but essentially the note itself needs other notes for it to really resonate. Just like letters, right? So phonemes would be like k, ch, p, t, right? You don't randomly put those together. You don't say things like, I'm going to name my first child. That sounds pretty musical name, I think, but, right? What you want to be able to do is have some understanding for how the words are put together. I learned recently, in the last many years, that anything that's associated with something closer to me is farther forward in your vowel placement. So me, and things that are farther from me are farther back. So you, me, you, near, far, here, there. That's interesting. If you want to be convincing as a writer or a poet, put the words in the order E, A, O. So for example, it's not hop-hip music. It's hip-hop music. Right? It's not talk-tick, it's tick-tock. It's not dong-ding, it's ding-dong. If you want to be convincing, put it in that order as you're writing and wanting to say something that's convincing. Same thing's true in music. If you listen to poets, that's the order. Unless they want to be funny. You can get a laugh by saying, "Old MacDonald had a farm, O-I-O-I-E." That's not how it goes. It goes E-I-E-I-O. That's kid humor. You know, kids love that stuff if you mess it up like that. And they would laugh. It's not O-I-O-I-E, you know, that whole thing. So the ABCs, right? G, what does a G sound like? It needs other letters. G can sound like go. G can sound like goat. G can sound like ghost. But it's got an H next to it now. Well, what happens with that? Now the H, now it says cough. And now it says though. O-U-G-H can be off or O, or it can be through, oo, or it can be bow, and bow can be bow, and bow can be bow, and bow can be bow. If you don't have context, where are we going with that? And the same thing happens to be true about music. If you have a G, now depending on your background in music, you might have lots of context or little context. If you're going to teach somebody about context, the most familiar G would be this G. Right? Another G might be that G. There's a G in this chord, right? This G. There's a lot of G's that you can. All these chords imply many things. That's the 70s G. You know, you get the idea that the notes have the same potential. So when you have a song like, you take a song that has the same 3 notes, you might have, or even 1 note. There's a song called, so that's Like Someone in Love is the name of that song. And those 3 G's are all very meaningful, but they have sort of a different yearning about them. Those are all G's. There's a G down here. Here's a G, and it wants to go to this note. Here's a G. So it's not the note name that you're attending to when you listen, it's where the note wants to go. And you can predict the next word I'm going to say. I say this this morning to the class. You know the next word I'm going to before I So why should I talk, right? That's how you listen. And the same thing's true in music. As you get more and more understanding from music, you feel where that might go next. They call it syntax in English. They can call it syntax in music. So that's an important thing for us to understand. And I'm not the first person to be concerned about this. I'm not going to have you read. That's a lot of words. That's the opposite of the other slides. My other slides were Zen slides. But this basically says that Hummel, do you know who Hummel is? Hummel is a person who wrote a trumpet concerto that all trumpet players have to play to get into music school. They have to play Hummel concerto and the Haydn concerto, right? Well, Hummel was an exuberant improviser. So was Bach, so was Mozart, so was Beethoven, so was Brahms, everybody. The history of music is linked to the history of improvisation. Everything started as an improvisation. Everything. Every style you can think of started as an improvisation. So that's an interesting idea. The slide before this, Virginia Woolf, the author, she said that when you read a sentence, your mind should explode and give birth to a lot of ideas. That's pretty amazing. This says that if you always play from a written score and never try your hand at improvising, you're missing an opportunity to learn something. And go ahead and make the mistake. Go ahead and do your best, but do it because it'll be better than never doing it. That's what Hummel recommends. And he was worried. He said that it was an urgent problem in 1828 that people were improvising less as musicians. What does he think it is now? Here's a picture of learning to read. It's also improvisation. So this is a very good picture of how we learn to read. This is a 10-year-old and an 8-month-old. Now there's 3 pictures in a row, and they're going to engage in 4 things. There's going to be some prediction going on, anticipation, right? What's coming next? They're going to be grouping sounds, these phonemes. There's words and sentences and stories to tell, right? Grouping. Listening for the poetry. What's the reuse of material? What's the repetition and the meaning? And this idea of an interaction taking place, right? So those 4 things are in place here. In the second picture, they're even more into it. And the next picture is really telling. Did you see the eyes? Yeah. That's the beginning of learning to read right there. Now, if you want to learn to read music, have something like that established. Many people that are musicians learn to read because their mother or father was an organist and they sat next to them on the piano bench. Or they were in church and they were singing in the hymns. My wife learned to read music in church because her father was a good musician. He could sing all 4 parts. Her mother was the organist. And so he got bored with singing the bass part, so he started singing melody. And then he sang the alto part of it. And then she said, oh, is that how it works? And she was being read to. And then she could read. It's interesting. Now, it's not that easy. Of course, there's people who have these challenges and those challenges, but that's a good context for how it might begin. So, this improvisation idea, let's get over our fear of improvising. We're going to do some music making. Let's get over our fear. I mentioned these to Paul and his family and friends. There are 6 fears here. One is the fear of death. The fear of death is, maybe as a musician, you might feel like you're going to die on stage or something. That's like a comedian who doesn't get any laughs. Steve Martin tells a story where he told all these jokes, and they were all, he thought, good jokes, and nobody was laughing. He's telling this to an audience. He's saying all these jokes, and nobody's laughing. He looks at his calendar, and he goes, oh, tomorrow night is the plumbing convention. Because the audience wasn't understanding the plumbing jokes, right? Yeah. Then there's this idea of unusual states of mind. Nobody wants to feel like a fool. Same with loss of reputation. Let's say you're really good at music and you make a mistake and you're worried that people are going to think worse of you. Mistakes are learning. If you're not making mistakes, let's learn. Let's go there. Silicon Valley, they say fail fast. Let's go. That's how you learn and that's how you grow. Loss of livelihood because you lost your reputation. Now you don't have a job. Fear, what I'm doing right now is the #1 fear in America, public speaking. So imagine, I think improvisation is the #1 fear in America. People just don't know, right? And then the fear of ghosts is what everybody has these, like, you fill in your baggage. How could I ever be as good as you have to let go of that, because there's only one you. So, musical thought, this idea of having some kind of interaction that is musical and it ands it. Did you ever go to comedy improvisation? They talk about yes-anding. In music, you do the same thing. So if I play this song is a great yes-and. All right, so it's Honeysuckle Rose. That's an idea. So I'll do it again. How about if I do it again? You hear how that same idea is anded? And I do it again. That idea of anding is necessary. So in theater, you might have a cup of water and say, you want a drink? Now, if she said no, then she wouldn't yes and, right?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And so now I want to see what she's going to do with it. Aha!
Yes.
Now what are you going to do? Don't spill it.
I'm going to put a little something else in it.
Aha! There you go. So you understand, that's anding. If I improvise something, the interaction with others can be the and, or if I'm solo playing, if I play something like, I might do an and like, and maybe one more. Right, so there's an idea of anding like that. The one of the most common ands in poetry and music is called a tricolon. It's a poetic device where you have three things that are said. 'Tis the gift to be simple. 'Tis the gift to be free. 'Tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. Simple Gifts is a very popular song. Thomas Baylis, I think, wrote that. But it has a poem that's very convincing because it repeats the words, 'tis the gift. That's a convincing. And the same thing with the music of Simple Gifts. Ba 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 ba. That's referred to as a tricolon. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Ba 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 ba, and then ba 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 ba, and then ba 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 ba. It's three things. The last one is usually longer. It's a very common way to develop an idea and to and something. So this next slide is a video. I want you to listen to a 2-year-old doing this. You don't have to be 18 years old in a music school to do this stuff. The best improvisers are folks that have an embrace for that when they're young. Everybody has different potentials. This person you're about to hear, this young lady is my daughter, so she's growing up in a very musical family. She's 20 years old now. She's 2 in this video. But I have, my colleague at Eastman calls me the Piaget of musicians because I've documented my children's music so much. In fact, this person's, my daughter's favorite key to sing in was E flat. Everything she kind of sang was in E flat. And so I kind of helped her by singing in that key, even when she was really young. So she's going to sing, she just had finished singing that song, This Old Man, he played one, you know that one? He played knick-knack on my drum with a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. And guess what? You get to do it again. What's a 2-year-old's favorite word besides no? Again. Again means, I need the pathways, do that again. No means, I want to be independent. But maybe not, because you can't run in the street, right? So I got to provide some help for that. So this idea of what you're about to hear, she's a little spunky, my daughter. I said, sing This Old Man, you just did it. I want to hear it again. She goes, no. And I said, oh, you just did it in E flat. I tried to talk her into it. I said, can you sing do? It's a solfege pitch, right? Do. She goes, me. She gave me a hard time. But then she goes, mi, so, do, and she's off to improvise. And my wife is singing with her, and there's an interaction, and there's all this stuff that happens. in a 2-minute segment that demonstrates what I'm talking about, that people at a high level of performance are doing also, but it's real life. This is in the moment, and it's a musical conversation. Go ahead, sing it. Bum, bum, bum. Go ahead.
No.
No.
Do da do.
Da ba da ba bum.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da da da. Da 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 do.
Do.
Me.
Me.
So do.
Right.
Me so do. Me so do. You make a house for.
Okay, now please sing this, old man. You just did it in tune in E flat.
No.
This da ba bum.
No, no, no.
No, no, no. La la la.
No.
Thank you. That's the idea, right? It's okay to give a little bit of love to that. Now, typically, when I would try to video or record my kids, I had to hide it because they were like the Indian spiritual idea that you can't be photographed. You know, they don't want to be. They shut down when I had the video on. But if I could sneak it, I might be able to get some evidence of maybe what they were doing. I don't mean sneak it in a sly way. I just mean try to document it. And in that case, I had the video camera there in my hand. And she knew it, so she kind of shut down from doing anything. But then she forgot. And she went into doing something. So it's interesting. The reason I enjoyed documenting my kids was because I wanted to learn myself about how do you learn to be a good musician. And secondly, what do kids actually do? What is the real evidence for what do kids sing when they're on the playground? They sing stuff like this, actually. And also depends on their background, where they live, what songs they've learned, right? So, include and transcend. It's a really nice way to think about creativity. If you want to write a string quartet, has anybody ever written one before? Yeah, let's listen to those pieces and then try to write one. Has anybody ever tried to improvise a rhythm before? Yeah, let's listen to some pieces that have good rhythm and then let's try to make one of those. And that's what include and transcend means. You include repertoire that you know, and it's really a concept to think whole, part, whole. The whole would be all the songs you know. The part would be all the parts that involve a song, and then the whole becomes more understood because creativity happens. A lot of people, when they're in situations for teaching, it's part, 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 part. But it needs a concept of context, so the context of whole. So if you have a song like Simple Gifts, and we're in the key of I decorated at the end a little, just the first part of the song. So if I went, 'tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the... And when you find yourselves in the place just right, 'twill be... Like in those spaces I was giving you, like what's happening? Can you continue the melody? How much, can you hear 4 parts? Can you hear 1 part? Can you hear the rhythm that I'm singing? So ba 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 ba. Yeah, let's try that. Echo me, right? I'll say it and then you say the same thing. Ba 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 ba. Now what's a different one? How about if I went ba 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 and move your body a little bit. You don't have to dance for me yet. But if you move your body to a steady beat, it's very helpful. Remember, all your music making has to come from the body. When you play an instrument, it's an extension of your mind, body, and spirit. It comes from within. The body moves, the body sings. Nothing better than that. Ba 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 is one way it could go. How about this one? Ba 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 ba. How about that one? Ready, go. How about this one? Ba 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 ba. Now trust yourself and make one. Ready and go. Ba ba. Yeah, it's kind of like when you're a kid and you can speak really well. Do you ever meet a real young kid who speaks really well? Can they spell everything they're saying? No. Do kindergarten teachers look for kids, knowing every word they can say? Like my little daughter might say something like, "Hey, Dad, you mentioned to me that we could go to the playground." And I might say to her, "You can't say mention until you can spell it." That wouldn't be appropriate, would it? No. But we do that in music all the time when we say to kids, don't play by ear. They don't have to know how to spell everything they can do by ear. If it sounds good, it is good. How do you know it sounds good? Because you're musical. You know it sounds good. You say, "Well, I'm not that musical." Well, that's a good start, because at least you can tell. That's just supposed to be a joke that when people say to me they can't sing, I say one of two things. I say, "Well, you forgot how to sing, because when you were a baby you sang." There's not two voices when you're a baby. Or I say, "Oh, well, that's a good start. You can tell it's the same or it's not the same, right? Is this the same as this?" Right, they're not the same. There's only one note that was different. That's a good start. You can tell. You hear where I'm going with that? It's a very optimistic viewpoint that's important for learning, because you want to know what something is and what it isn't, and make comparisons. That's how you learn, by making comparisons. In a healthy way, not comparisons in a negative way, comparisons in a healthy way. So simple gifts. There's a different chord here. You hear that? It goes back to the first one, and then it goes to the next one. And then it goes back to there's only two. I call it pendular, like a pendulum. I can help you hear it better by singing. Do, do, and then it goes do, do, and then do, do, do. Right? So if you look at the bass line that's written up there, if you read music notation, another way to think about it is a tree. So do, 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 do. Right? Those go with do, and then do, 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 do. Those go with do. You don't have to look at it, but that's just a visual example of what's going on when you hear the song, right? And then it goes back to do. And I like to use solfege to help. Those note names are F and C, but the note names aren't going to help you hear it. They'll help you identify where it is on the piano. So the note names are helpful with objects. So F, you can do this song in F. You can do it in E flat. You can do it in any key, C. Right? The idea is to be able to be good at that. That's called practicing your instrument. But the relationship stays the same. So, can you sing, "They were in this key, do, 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 ready, sing that, do, 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 do. We're going together. Okay, here's another choice you could do. Instead of singing do, do, you got that one? Do, do. That's another choice. It'll sound like this. Do, 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 do. So which one do you want? Do you want do, 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 or do you want do, 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 and I'm singing the melody? Do you have a part you want to sing? And if you're not quite aware of the pitches I'm singing, you understand the rhythm I'm doing, right? Ba, ba, you feel that, right? You know what you want to sing? You're all starting on do, but you know where it's going? Okay, that's what it feels like to improvise. You already know what you're going to sing, and you made a choice. That's what improvisers are doing. And if you wrote it down, you could decide, oh, well, I don't like that, I'm going to change it. In fact, here's Aaron Copland's pencil. He was making those decisions with the same notes. The bass line and the melody, right there. He's in the key of G major for those of you who read music. But it's the same thing. And what I'm demonstrating here is that it's like a living thing. So there's a guy named Arthur Kessler who talks about holons, holarchies. Living things that have context and form, like atoms inform molecules, inform matter, trunks and roots and branches and leaves and twigs, they all need each other, right? And the same thing's true in music, that you've got these levels of understanding that are going on as music is happening. And we can improvise at any of the levels. So let's do our performance. So undo, you know your part? All right, I'll help you by gesturing, okay? Ready? Do 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 do. Yeah, we should go on the road. And there are more choices you could make. For example, for those of you who are a little more aware of music, you do. That's the mi, they call it. Mi, fa, mi. Because re is already in the melody. Da, 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 da. You hear that? Da, da. You can have more choices and make your way through the song. You can also have choices like this. If you're this close to the song, do, 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 do. If you zoom out of the song, do, 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 is what you get. Can you hear that in the mouth? Do, 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 do. And if you zoom out, do, 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 sing that one. And we call that do, mi, sol in solfege. And that's not the only order of those three notes. You could do so, mi, so, do, so, do. They all love each other. They all resonate in the same way. And then re, ti, so, they have this thing together, right? And then you can combine them to make some interesting melodies. This is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about in a musical way that everybody can do. Everybody has some potential for this. Some potential. Now, the same thing's true about rhythm, but I think I've spoken a little bit about rhythm. Remember when I was talking about ba 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 and that kind of thing? You think about a song like When the Saints Go Marching In. That's a jazz version of the song, right? The jazz musicians are doing the same thing. I started with simple gifts on purpose because, yes, jazz is an improvised art form, but all music is improvised, potentially, right? So, does anybody have perfect pitch in here? No? Because I'm going to play in a different key than what's written there. Okay? So I'm just playing you the song that you know, right? How'd I get all those notes? I'm just practiced a long time with the stuff I just taught you, right? Because you think about it. Oh, when the saints, that's bum, 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 just like simple gifts. Da, 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 bum, bum, bum. How many times on? Oh, when the saints, bum, bum, bum. It happens 3 times. Bum, 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 bum. And saints go marching in, it goes to re. Like Simple Gifts does that. Re, ti, so. It's the same thing, but not really. There's so many songs that go to, we call it re. Can you understand what I mean? Do, mi, so, re. Can you hear that? So, Mary had a little lamb, re, and the chord is 5. It's the thing. London Bridge is falling down, fall. That's re, it goes to 5. When the saints go marching, Ray, and it goes 5. Ray, 5. Is there only one song? No. There's other things that, but there's so many. Once you learn about 10 songs, the next 10 are easier. Because you're like, oh, that's just like that song I know. Yeah. So there's this Saints Go Marching In example. And if I were to improvise, what if I played, I don't know if I played, I'll repeat that. Maybe one more time. That's how you get in the moment of the skill of doing that. Obviously, it takes some time with an instrument. But, I mean, I might walk down the street, I'll be singing that. And then I get to the piano, I can't wait to play it. And then there's this Mozart string quartet that I found with the same chords as When the Saints Go Marching In. And we don't have to learn the quartet, but the last 8 bars there, it's the same as the When the Saints Go Marching In. Because it's one of those chord progressions that the Italians named, right? So, when the saints goes with do, go marching in, do, saints go marching in, it goes to the 5 chord. So that's like 1, 5, 1. But then it goes into this thing that I told you before, like Amazing Grace, like a blues, like a lot of classical music, a lot of jazz music. It goes, oh Lord, oh Lord, I want. That's 1. I want to be in the 4, goes to 4. When the saints 1 go marching 5, 1. So it goes from the 1 to 4 to 1 to 5 to 1, just like Amazing Grace and all those other songs that I was demonstrating. It's a common chord progression. So Mozart uses that 1, 4, 1, 5, 1 in the string quartet. The last 8 bars is that progression because it's common. And on the cello part is do, ti, do, what we were singing before. And the second violin part is mi, fa, mi, and that's another voice you can choose. It's really, the mystery is not that hidden. It's just a function of learning the way music works so you can speak it. And then when you know the context for what you're doing. So let me summarize with this idea that, there's my water. It's always dangerous to speak for an hour without taking a drink of water, right? So, think about the 4 vocabularies that are listed there, and then analyze is talking about music. So listening is a vocabulary. Your listening vocabulary might be larger than your speaking vocabulary when you learn. And with improvisation, it's the same. And the idea is to have clarity of your hearing so that when you can speak, you're aware of what you're saying. That's improvising, comes out of that listening. It's a big relationship like this. And then when you learn to read, your improvised experiences. Now, the improvised experiences don't have to be that you've invented, bebop scales and played a bunch of hard jazz music. It means that you're in the moment. It means that you can make simple choices. And the more you're aware of those choices, the more the reading then taps into that musicianship that you have. And people listen to your tone quality. And they listen to your style. They listen to how you're expressing yourself. The thing I'm trying to suggest is that we could maximize more of those skills for our learning. Then you have the writing part. Writing is reflecting. Writing music is really helpful to learning to do all of it because you can reflect on your learning. People ask me all the time, I tell my Eastman students, writing music will help you be a better trombone player because you'll reflect on what you're playing on the trombone. And then when you go back to play, you'll have more awareness for it, and you'll have a better understanding of it. That's a good thing. Analysis is talking about it. So it will only help if you've got sounds in your head. Remember that experience has to happen before the theory. So I said this morning in my session, if you've never met a dog, I could tell you how to spell the word dog, D-O-G. I could have you read the word dog, D-O-G. But you've never met a dog. How do you explain a dog to somebody who's never met a dog without explaining a rabbit or a cat? And there's all kinds of dogs out there, right? And then how many of y'all have had a dog or do have a dog? Okay, how many people have never had a dog? Right, so there's that conversation to have, right? So trying to explain a dog to somebody, have them experience a dog. And then when you say the word dog, that's the key. And so analysis, you have to be careful, because if you start analyzing sentences or music, you start analyzing all the music, but you don't have any sound for it, that could present some kind of, like if you know the name of a note, but you don't have a sound for it, that presents an issue. I think you find that common sense, right? And so those are the 4 categories I'll leave you with. Think about this for learning and improvising and creating, for reading and writing and analyzing, for improvising music and listening, improving your listening. You want to interact with folks. You want to anticipate and predict familiar and unfamiliar music. Always start with the familiar and go to the unfamiliar. The more unfamiliar it is, the more of a foreign language it is, and people they'll kind of get, it's like a fire hose for them. You don't even buy like a fire hose with water. I want a drink of water. No, fire hoses, that's too much. So you think about how familiar moves to unfamiliar. And then you've got grouping, and paying attention to how the groupings are reused. So if you hear a song next time, listen for the repetition. It doesn't have to be an exact repetition. This is a famous. Right? That's ba 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 ba, and again ba 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 ba, and again ba 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 ba. Right? Because it's a little variation of it. Or you know the famous song "I Got Rhythm." It's a trichord. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. And then the bridge of I Got Rhythm is the same rhythm. It's all based on one rhythm. Gershwin knew what he was doing. This is the idea. Listen for that stuff. That's really what the magic is about. And then compare. Is what I heard the same, or is it not the same? And I always ask people, how different does it have to be until you can tell? That would be a sign of your potential for what's going on. And I want to teach according to that. Everybody's unique. You might have a rhythmic skill and you're working on your harmony, or you might have really expressive ability, but you're still working on your rhythm. There's multi-dimensional aspects of learning music or anything. And that's key to understanding what I'm trying to present today. So in summary, I'm recommending to the profession of music, but I think in general for all of us, as we try to think of each other as musicians, let's say, for music, but in terms of our humanity, that we put creativity at the core of what we're doing. We try to think more about how we can make something and serve somebody and have something that's inspirational and meaningful through those interactions that come together as we have our group. And I worked with the group this morning. There's 3 ingredients necessary for motivation. It comes from a theoretical model called self-determination theory. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. There's a book called Drive you can read if you're interested in this. But you want to present opportunities for autonomy, which means you are capable of making choices and having that. Mastery, which means you start to get pretty good at it, and you want to try it again because you're getting pretty good at it. And then the third thing is community, which this place is a community. It's a great purpose. The idea of relatedness. I have a purpose. I'm going to come to the community, and we're going to help each other and serve each other. I have autonomy because I can make choices. And I'm masterful because I start to get pretty good at this talent that I have, and I can give it as a gift. And that's what I mean about waking up the sleeping gifts and leading them out. So keep in mind that as a result of this interaction we're having, you might have more questions than you had before you met me. But that's not a bad thing. Sometimes I ask my students, does anybody have any questions? And nobody says anything because they've got a lot going on. And I'll say, oh, well, does anybody have any answers? Because I'm trying to bring up some ideas that will help people maybe learn and grow, especially in the area of creativity and music learning. So thank you very much for having me. I had a blast.
Thank you so much. That was great.
How about this guy right here? Huh?
No. Thank you so much for coming. This really enriched me. I hope it enriched you. Next month, we're going to have another fascinating talk. It'll be completely different. We're going to hear about Shostakovich when he wrote his Seventh Symphony at the Siege of Leningrad. The author, M.T. Anderson.
Yeah,
It's
nice.
really spectacular. So that's May 17th. It will be our last Saturday 3:30 program because we figured come June you're going to want to be in your gardens or at the beach, but come at 7:30 because we're going to have a lot of programs in June at 7:30. So thank you so much for coming, Chris. This was very enriching.
Thank you. I hope it was helpful. Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I hope I see you around somewhere. Take care.